So if we're going to start with the meditation, using some of that, those ideas of Tantra, right? Then for that we have to, the Vajrayana, or Tantra, we have to start with bodhicitta, motivation. Otherwise, it actually doesn't serve as. Otherwise, it's not actually a Buddhist tantric practice, right? Because Buddhist tantra is Mahayana, so you have to generate. So let's do our motivation first. We can first begin by just thinking, I'm so happy, I'm so fortunate, actually, I'm so happy to be alive today. Among the infinite different life forms that exist, this precious human rebirth that I have now, with this kind of body and this kind of brain, this kind of mind, these kinds of eyes and ears, and these kind of constituents of our body are the best kind of body in the universe, it's said by the Buddha, for achieving enlightenment. Said like in the entire, infinite universe, there's really nothing more valuable than having just even one day with this kind of body and mind, having met the Mahayana teachings and the Vajrayana teachings, Tantric teachings. So this rebirth is like more precious. This kind of life is more precious than anything else. Because with this kind of life I can quickly become enlightened for the welfare of all people. The Buddha said there are countless beings, infinite beings suffering in hell realms, hungry ghost realms, animal realms, or sort of spaced out in God realms. I've been in those realms too, countless times. Now I have this precious human life, in which I can take the essence, achieve enlightenment, and be a benefit to all those folks. But this life won't last forever. Definitely will end. It can end any time. There's no guarantee. So I have to take the essence of this life now. In this day, in this hour, in this moment. So how do I take the essence of this moment, of this life, in this moment, in this hour? So for sure, the answer of the Buddhas give is bodhicitta. Renouncing self-centeredness, embracing love, compassion, cherish infinite being. As we just contemplate, we can see that actually. If I cherish only myself, if I only focus on my own self-centered self-image and status, comfort, wealth, power, it's like feels like me against the universe. The universe always wins that battle. So I wind up through that kind of self-centeredness. It gives rise to all the other afflictive emotions. Jealousy for what others have, anger and hatred, for anyone who gets in my way, fear that I'll lose what I have, anxiety, hopelessness or depression, if I don't have what I want, and limitless craving, limitless desire. As long as I'm just focused on myself, right? It's like the desire, the craving never ends. There's never any satisfaction. It's just like moments of relief getting something, and then that relief again becomes dissatisfaction. The dissatisfaction of having, right? Of having. Kind of unrealistic self-centeredness is my inner enemy, the cause of all my suffering. One tries to be happy through self-cherishing, and it only gives rise to one's own sorrow, and then also one makes problems for others. Of course, then when I make problems for others with my selfishness, then they don't like me, then it brings me more problems, and them more problems. Whether it brings like problems between two friends, problems between nations. So, environmental disasters, wars, hatred between groups of people, hatred between former friends, they all come from that excessive self-centeredness. One tries to really like recognize experientially how that excessive self-centeredness is like unbearable. They call it self-cherishing or narcissism or self-preoccupation, whatever you want to call it. Whereas the opposite, right? The cause of happiness is love and compassion. The love and compassion that include oneself, but also include infinite others. And we can see again that when we practice the moments, the days, weeks, the more we cultivate love and compassion, immediately there's like a sense of peace in our hearts. Then we give others also so much peace, not harming them. If we're loving compassion to others, then our relationships improve. So we have peace in our own hearts and peace between people. By living, I can see, contemplate, living with love and compassion. In this lifetime, our relationships improve, We have a sense of purpose and meaning. We have like a clear conscience. We have a sense of joy, actually. Even scientific researchers have shown, actually when they look at happiness, even scientific research has shown that the level of happiness people experience when giving is greater than that they experience when receiving. And the level of happiness people experience when helping others is even greater than the level of happiness experienced when receiving. So by living with love and compassion, even in this lifetime, right away, I receive so much peace and happiness. And at the time of death, I die with a sense of peace, right? Because I know I lived a good life. A life grounded in love and compassion. By living with love and compassion, also my future lives will be good. Because that's actually the best way to create positive karma is with compassion. And then even as Chandrakirti said, right, Buddhahood, enlightenment itself, comes mainly through compassion. He said compassion, the beginning is the seed, in the middle is what cultivates, and at the conclusion is like the quality of, is there as well. Is the quality of the enlightened state. So in the beginning, the middle, and the end, compassion is what leads to enlightenment. So then the answer, right? We try to cultivate a feeling and recognition of ourselves. The purpose of my life is to abandon self-preoccupation, and as much as I can, live each moment with a sense of love and compassion that includes myself and infinite others, everyone, without leaving anybody out. Completely cherishing others from my heart. Each day, thinking, how could I most embody love and compassion? How could I most be of service to the most beings? Right now, I can't be of much service as I would like to others. So therefore, in order to be of perfect service to others, most skillful, when I want to achieve full enlightenment, Buddhahood, for the welfare of all sentient beings. So that's the thought of bodhicitta, the purpose of my life. Purpose of my life is completely cherishing others with love and compassion in my heart, and striving for full enlightenment to achieve, of course, by the way, my own welfare is achieved, but mainly it's to achieve the welfare of infinite sentient beings. And that's how it is with compassion. The main purpose in compassion is to free others from suffering. But a side effect of that is that one's own suffering also becomes healed, cured. our minds kind of, as much as possible, infused with that motivation, compassion, and bodhicitta, then we'll begin a little bit of experimenting, a little bit of tantric technique. So we said that in Tantra also the main obstacle obstacles are ordinary appearances and ordinary concepts. So we're just going to focus for humans meditating together on emptiness, to dissolve those ordinary appearances, ordinary concepts, ordinary grasping the ordinary. So a sense that, so we could have a sense, I'm in Fairfax, Virginia. When I think I'm in Fairfax, Virginia, then there's some idea that is in my mind, right, about a truly existent, inherently existent from its own side place that exists out there, independent of my mind, inherently from its own side. That's the object of negation of the place. So I can have that feeling, right? Oh yeah, there's this place that really exists out there, independently, Fairfax. But actually, if I were to check, right, first of all the dirt, if I were to pick up each handful of dirt in Fairfax, searching for Fairfax, actually I would not find any of the dirt. If I took like a truckload of dirt from Fairfax and brought it to Prince William County, then Prince William County wouldn't become Fairfax. So actually in the earth of Fairfax, there's no Fairfax. If I walk to every building in Fairfax, the city of Fairfax, searching, looking for, even if I go to the town hall, right, and look at all the different cinder blocks and bricks and cement, there's no one cinder block there that's Fairfax. If I look at the mayor, actually that mayor may not even, isn't always in Fairfax for sure, so that mayor's not Fairfax. If I look at the people, walking, driving around, they're not Fairfax. The air that's blowing through is not Fairfax. The trees are not. Cars definitely are not Fairfax. So although it appeared to me at the beginning that there was some truly existent, inherent from its own side place, Fairfax, actually that doesn't exist at all. Fairfax does exist in mere name. It's merely a name labeled on certain appearances. There's just a mere appearance and merely labeled. There is no inherently existent Fairfax existing from its own side. So as the object of negation, that inherent Fairfax doesn't exist at all. Let that ordinary appearance dissolve. Into emptiness. Because actually it already is empty from its own side. It always was empty from its own side. The same thing about this building. You may have some idea, office building. This room you may have some idea, center, Buddhist center. And again, as soon as you have those ideas, there's some sense, some concept of inherent existence we're habituated to grasping at inherent existence since beginning this time. But again, if you search, it appears like the center exists from its own side. But like in the strands of carpet, you can't find the center. And the pieces of wood, ceiling tile, door frame, nails. There's absolutely no center there existing on its own side. Also in the people. Can't say this person is the center. So the center exists, right? It's just mere appearance of the base, and then label. Right? Merely label, totally empty in its own side. So allow that appearance of an inherently existing center to dissolve. Where you see it was an illusion, a hallucination. Check your own experience, right? Even if you allow those appearances of inherently existing, ordinary, external environment to see them as empty, still in your heart, there's a subtle grasping at the I. I exist. I truly exist right here, inherently from my own side, in the middle of my chest or in my stomach. I'm here. Truly existent, real from my own side. So without further, that's also the object of negation, right? The inherently existent self. It seems so concrete, more solid than a diamond, more solid than a mountain. The hallucination that we've believed in since beginning this time. But that inherent I, right? That truly existent, inherently real I, again, same thing. It doesn't exist on any of the cells. We're losing cells every second, actually. It doesn't exist on the liquid in the body. The body's heat. It's the body's heat that inherently exists in the body. The matter, solid parts of the body, like the bones, and the inherently existent eye. The breath is like the inherently existent eye. And even the consciousness, which is made up of moments, Yesterday's consciousness is not the inherently existent. Tomorrow's consciousness is not the inherently existent me. Even in this moment, I can't even find a moment of consciousness that abides. So that inherently existent me is a complete hallucination. Doesn't exist anywhere at all, not one atom. The I does exist, right? Merely labeled, in mere name, on mere appearance, totally empty in its own self. See if you can allow yourself to see that inherently existent I never existed at all. The self does exist in mere name, merely labeled. It has no inherent existence from its own self. Because it's merely labeled, it's empty from its own self. Because it's empty from its own self, it can exist as that which is merely labeled. And so allow your concept, your image of an inherently existent you to dissolve into space-like emptiness. So now, within that space-like emptiness, right, motivated by compassion, the wisdom understanding emptiness itself, so with no concept of inherent existence, but as the mere sport of the wisdom understanding emptiness. You can imagine that wisdom arises in the form of a white lotus made of light, with 1,000 open petals, radiant, translucent, pure, pristine. With no concept of inherent existence, but just the lack of inherent existence itself is appearing. Right? The wisdom understanding that lack of inherent existence is appearing as a white lotus. And on that lotus, in the center, is a white moon cushion, a white cushion. the center of that moon cushion, standing upright, is a white syllable, Kri, the seed syllable of Avalokiteshvara, the embodiment of all the Buddha's compassion, the source of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And again, that white syllable Kri, if you visualize it, it's made up of parts. It's merely labeled totally empty from its own self. That white syllable Kri radiates light rays in all directions. Those light rays return, kind of bringing back the blessings and the compassion, enlightened qualities of all the Buddhas, of the 3 times and the 10 directions. And the light and the Kri transform into the form of Avalokiteshvara, Chenrezik into them. Say in English, the compassionate-eyed one, the Buddha of compassion. His body is white in color, like a snow mountain, but translucent, made of light, so you can see through. He's seated in the lotus or Vajra posture, you could say, with his legs crossed for meditation. His 4 arms, 2 arms meet at his in front, right at his heart, and hold a wish-granting gem of compassion. The real wish-granting gem is compassion itself. And his right hand, like it's raised at his right side, holds a mala, a rosary, to which he recites his mantra for all sentient beings. And his left hand, also raised up at his left side, holds a lotus. He wears silken garments and jeweled ornaments, a crown, earrings, bracelets and anklets. Celestial silken clothes. His body is made of light. And he exists as also merely labeled, totally empty of inherent existence, but appearing out of compassion. He has a gentle, sweet smile, and his eyes, which are the eyes of the Buddha, look with compassion on all sentient beings, as vast as the vastness of space. Imagine that Avalokiteshvara begins to radiate white light rays in the nature of enlightened compassion. fill the entire universe. And so they transform the entire universe. They transform all places into Potala Pure Land. They reach all sentient beings. And as they reach any sentient being, that sentient being is transformed from suffering into bliss. And they too become Avalokiteshvara, fulfilling their ultimate potential, like awakening their Buddha nature, fulfilling their ultimate potential and becoming a fully enlightened being. So, just for a few moments as we imagine those light rays filling the universe, transforming everyone into Avalokiteshvara, transforming every place into the Buddha's pure land of Potala, compassion, Buddha's pure land. We can also imagine the sound of Avalokiteshvara's mantra, which is the sound of enlightened compassion, filling the entire universe. As we do that, we can just kind of, as we visualize like that, we can quietly recite this mantra. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om. Om Mani Padme Hum. We can imagine that those light rays have radiated everywhere in the universe. All places are transformed into blissful Pure Land Potala, where beings fulfill their ultimate potential. All beings are transformed into the compassion, enlightened compassion, generates enlightened compassion light one. All sounds resonate with the energy and the sound of Om Mani Padme Hum. Then the light rays kind of reabsorb into the heart of Avalokiteshvara, Buddha of compassion. And let's dedicate any merit we've created for this brief meditation. May all beings realize bodhicitta, may they progress along the path and achieve the state of Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion. supreme jewel bodhicitta that is not arisen, that arise and grow, that has arisen, that not diminish, but increase. Futuristic curiosity. By this virtue, may I quickly achieve the state of Avalokiteshvara, in order to lead all sentient beings to Avalokiteshvara's state of compassionate, wise, enlightened, perfect being. Becomes a more interactive. You see, like, let's see. In a sense, that's staying mindful of emptiness, taking the form of the deity's enlightened body. Right? That's tantric mindfulness practice. So we've been doing mindfulness all through discovering Buddhism, so that's still mindfulness, right? But that's the tantric version of mindfulness, which is that you're being aware of emptiness, taking the form, right? Wisdom understanding emptiness, taking the form of a deity for the welfare of all sentient beings. So the mindfulness itself is the same, right? You're being aware of something. The difference is what you're being mindful of. Right? In some cases, you're being mindful of suffering. In other cases, you're being mindful of body or sensations. In this case, it's being mindful of that. And actually, I want to make a quick, just in relation to that practice we just did, I want to say a couple of things I want to say something briefly about that mantra, right? Om Mani Padme Hum. So if you, because actually we hadn't talked about that mantra in discovering Buddhism. It seems strange, right? Because in Tibetan Buddhism, it's like in Tibetan Buddhism, right? All those, like if you go there, you see those what are called rocks that are carved with Om Mani Padme, right? If you go around, you see pictures of those all the time, right? If you Google Tibet, then those come up, right? The carved rock, and usually it's carved Om Mani Padme. And if you ever go to like Nepal or India or haven't been to Tibet, but that's the same, right? That you'll see with the Tibetans with the prayer wheel, right? So what does the prayer wheel have on the outside and inside? Mostly Om Mani Padme. What are they saying usually when they're and then if you go to a village and you see a big prayer wheel and they turn it like that, right? It usually has Om Mani Padme. Then it's actually in almost like, what's the word? That's the most common mantra practiced in Tibet. And partly because why, right? Because the Dalai Lama is the incarnation of the Buddha of compassion, right? And it's said that Avalokiteshvara is said to be taken Tibet under his protection and vowed to protect the Tibetan and guide the Tibetan people. So Lama Zopa often says, for centuries, Avalokiteshvara guided the Tibetan people in the form of the Dalai Lama, but now he's in the whole world. Because now he's not just for Tibetans. I guess he never was really, because he's in China, Mongolia. I want to say a couple comments about this mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. One thing I really like, it's very simple, right? It's a 6-syllable mantra, but they say that it's funny. So it always makes me laugh to say about that mantra, because it said that, I can't remember exactly at the time, I think it's like that if a Buddha were to try to explain all the meanings of the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum for like, I forget the length of time, maybe an eon or something, he wouldn't finish. So the chances of me doing much is not so good, but I thought it's good to say a couple of things, like, so the one actually it's true though, really. I mean, actually because all Buddhists, they say this also, which is true actually, if you really contemplate, you'll see it. If you start to study it, you'll see it's true actually. Is that there's no Buddhist teachings it's like, if you understand just that mantra, there's no Buddhist teaching that's not included in that mantra. So in other words, if you understand all the implications of that mantra, then you've understood all Buddhist teachings. Does that make sense? Like, and I'll say I want to give a couple different kinds of explanations. One is, so just the syllable Om, which people know, because even we know that from sometimes in Hinduism they also recite Om. So in Buddhism, just Om actually has three parts to it, of the sound. Om, right? Ah, U, Ma. Om. So actually when you really recite Om, it's like Om, Om. And it said that those three parts symbolize body, speech, and mind. And in one sense, and you can say at the level of the basis, right, of our current level, there are ordinary body, speech, and mind. In the path, it's the path of transforming your body, speech, and mind, and the result is the Buddha's enlightenment, body, speech, and mind. So in one sense, if you just think of Om, just alone, right, actually you could never, so what does that mean? How do you transform your body, speech, and mind that are ordinary into the body, speech, and mind of Avalokiteshvara, for example? Well, that would be the entire, that alone would be, you have to understand the entire path to enlightenment, right? If you're going to really understand what does Om mean, well, how do you transform your body? What does that mean, transform your body into a Buddhist body? How does somebody transform their ordinary mind into a Buddhist? Right? Well, actually, for one thing, you'd have to understand emptiness. Right? So just with Om, then you have to say, well, to really understand what does Om mean, you have to understand emptiness. So you can see how just the syllable Om, like you can see how then if a great teacher were going to explain, right, they could spend like 6 months on Om, just teaching that, and then they could say, okay, now we'll go on to Ma. And they wouldn't have completely taught everything about Om, right, because until you're a Buddha, actually, you can't know what is the Buddha's mind, actually, right? It's that only a Buddha can know a Buddha's mind. Right? We can't really know what a Buddha's mind is like. So actually, just to understand Om, then just the Ma part, right? To understand that, you have to be a Buddha, actually, to fully understand the meaning of in the Om. You'd have to be a Buddha, right? Because only a Buddha can fully comprehend another Buddha's mind. And then I'm just going to go through briefly. There are many different things, but I want to give the most commonly taught one, just to share that. So usually Mani is translated as Sanskrit, right? Mantras are Sanskrit. So Mani means jewel in Sanskrit. And Peme, or Padma, or Peme is how Tibetans pronounce it. It looks like Padma. Means lotus. And then Hum. So one way of interpreting that part is this: is that again, there are different levels of interpretation, but one I think is worth mentioning is, so Mani symbolizes the jewel can be used to sort of signify method, the method aspects of the path, and then Padme can be used to symbolize the wisdom aspects of the path. Right? And it's said that, like, right, a bird to fly to enlightenment, you have to have two wings, method and wisdom. So in one sense, if you look at Mani, right, you could say that's mainly compassion, right? Because what's the most important method to travel the path to enlightenment is love and compassion. Right? And then Padme, right, wisdom, mainly would be the wisdom understanding emptiness. Right? So all the teachings on bodhicitta, right, could be explained under the topic of Mani. And then also, if you want to understand that, it's not just compassion and love itself, but for example, all the teachings in the Abhisamaya Alankara that like embody, for example, like the 5 paths, the 10 bhumis, the 10 grounds, right, the 37 aspects of enlightenment, 108 aspects of the path, and so on. All those would be included in Mani. And Padme, right, like all the teachings of Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, Aryadeva on emptiness would all be included in Padme. Right? All the teachings on emptiness. Then also, like in the unique tantric approach, Mani, right, the method, can also be said to be bliss, or great bliss. And Padme can be the wisdom, emptiness wisdom, and then their non-duality. That they're together in the mantra can symbolize their non-duality. I'll give one other, I forgot the ones I remember. Then there's another way of interpreting them, which is each syllable can also symbolize purifying particular afflictive emotions. So Om can symbolize the purification of pride, Ma, that would be the purification of jealousy, Ni of desire, Pa of ignorance, Me of greed, and Hum of anger. They can also symbolize the 6 perfections that a bodhisattva practices in order to become a Buddha, right? So then Om would be the perfection of meditation, Ma of ethics, Ni of joyful effort, Pa of wisdom, Me of generosity, and Hum of patience. They can also symbolize purifying the 6 realms of existence. So you start to get a feeling of, wow, like just that one mantra has huge meaning. So then, like, it's funny because to me, because sometimes people look and go, oh, like someone in Tibet just, oh my goodness. But actually, if the person understands the meaning, imagine if if the person understands those meanings, then it's very, very profound. Khenpo Rinpoche said, it could also be symbolized like in highest yoga tantra, they can the man, mani, and peme can symbolize the illusory body and clear light, the completion stage of highest yoga tantra, for example. Essentially, there's no teaching that's not included, from the very beginning all the way up to the highest, most complicated, most subtle teachings of the Buddha. They're all included in just that mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. So you can see why like great lamas and yogis practice that, and simple Tibetans practice it. And anybody, so it's always. So I wanted to put in an idea that it's like that's a really good practice. It's that mantra. But then really, like they say, just reciting the mantra has benefit. But if you understand the meaning, mainly it's the Buddha of compassion. But if you start to understand the meaning, that I'm going to say too, because mantras are part of Tantra, right? Like, so actually, the word mantra means the root man is also is like similar, because Sanskrit and English are related. So it's mind. Man is the root sound that's connected actually linguistically with the word mind. And then tra means protection. So the idea of a mantra is that it's something to protect your mind. Right? And so the idea would be like that. Well, actually, the idea is that instead of using your mind to give rise to hatred or anger or jealousy, or you're reciting that mantra and meditating on those things, mostly compassion, but then also you can meditate on all those other things, right? Since they're all included there. If you're trying to be patient, then you can recite that mantra and think about patience. Trying to practice joyful effort, and you recite that mantra, and you think about how to generate enthusiasm and joyful effort, and so on. So so Om Mani Padme Hum, that's really good practice. So you can see why. Now I just want to say, like, you get I just want to give a little flavor for why Tibetans practice that so much. It's actually like you could study your whole life. Actually, you could study thousands of lifetimes until you become Buddha. But, okay, well, maybe I'll just pause at any comments or questions before, because I'm going to transition next to talking a little bit about highest yoga tantra, which we haven't talked about much yet. But any comments or questions about what we've talked about so far? Okay, so I'll talk a little bit now. So then I wanted to transition to, because we have still time. Yeah. So last time I had said we would talk a little bit about the highest yoga tantra. Right, so we've been going through last class, we went through that there are 4 classes or levels, tantras, right? And we talked about the differences a little bit between those in terms of transforming desire into the path. Right? And we said that, highest yoga tantra is the most advanced of the 4, right? It has unique qualities to it. And, somebody says we already said this, right? That in the very first class in this series, I said what you makes a teaching uniquely a Mahayana, right? All these teachings are Mahayana Buddhist that we're talking about, right? But the difference that makes something generally like Mahayana Buddhist versus Tantric Mahayana Buddhist, I said in the first class, is deity yoga, right? What we were just doing, emptiness taking the form of a deity. So I have a question for people who have studied, like some of you guys came to the class, like some of those classes with Khenpo Rinpoche in the retreat. So what's the difference? What's unique about, like, highest yoga tantra is the same as action tantra, right? The first class of tantra is action tantra, and the highest one is, the 4th is highest yoga tantra. So what's the difference? Why is it different? Like, they're all deity yoga. What's the difference? What makes it any different? Jody seems to remember.
No, I don't.
Is anybody?
Is it the completion state?
What about the completion?
Do the other ones have a completion state?
Yeah, so one is, that's one difference, is that, like the other classes of Tantra, they have what's called yoga with signs and yoga without signs. Those are the 2 parts of those practices. Whereas highest yoga Tantra has 2 stages, which is different, actually, than those 2 parts. The generation stage and the completion stage. So that is one difference, yeah.
So is it that in highest yoga tantra you imagine yourself to be the deity yourself?
No, Lama Tsongkhapa says that that exists in all 4 classes of Tantra. Like Lama Tsongkhapa said, some people in the past had said that only existed that didn't exist in action Tantra, particularly And he said that was incorrect. It does exist in Ashoka Tantra. So Lama Tsongkhapa clarified that. He said self-visualization as a deity exists in all four classes of Tantra. It was Lama Tsongkhapa's view, which is true. Unless you disagree with Lama Tsongkhapa. Gabe loves Lama Tsongkhapa, so he won't disagree. Well, I'll say a couple of things about unique qualities of highest yoga tantra. So, actually, there are unique qualities on the generation stage and unique qualities on the completion stage. A unique quality of highest yoga tantra on the generation stage is this practice of taking ordinary death, bardo, you know that term, bardo, the in-between, right? In-between life and death, and birth, right? So those three, birth, death, and bardo, whichever order you want to say them, right? Death, the bardo, and rebirth, into the path. That's a unique quality of the generation stage of highest yoga. Other teachings don't have an explanation for how to do that.
So you're saying the generation stage is also unique to highest yoga tantra?
Yeah, because the others don't have a term for generation. They just talk about yoga with signs and yoga without signs, and it's all part of that practice.
Okay.
So on the generation stage, what's unique to Highest Yoga Tantra is this practice of taking the three bodies, they call it, into the path. Because what happens is, in Highest Yoga Tantra, we've talked about this a little bit before in other classes, it's said that there are three bodies of a Buddha. The Dharmakaya, right, which is the truth body of a Buddha. The Sambhogakaya, which is to translate the enjoyment body, which is the translation of a Buddha. And then the Nirmanakaya, or the emanation body, the body that we can see, that can interact with ordinary people. Arya Bodhisattvas, Bodhisattvas who have seen emptiness directly, they can see the enjoyment body. So that body can relate to and guide high Bodhisattvas. But for ordinary people, we can only see the emanation body, the Nirmanakaya of the Buddha. And so the idea here, like actually, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama says this sometimes, when he teaches in the West, and in the East, that this idea of the three bodies of a Buddha exists in all Mahayana teachings. He says it's only through the practice of highest yoga tantra that you can really deeply understand how those arise and what their nature is, what their cause is in ordinary people, what the path is of how you achieve them, and then what their real, what they are and on the result. That only through understanding highest yoga tantra can you really deeply understand the path to those three bodies. And the idea is this, ultimately this happens on the completion stage, but as a preparation on the generation stage, these come in order. Generation comes first, and then completion comes after, as completion kind of implies the word. But so on the generation stage, we're starting to practice transforming death into the Dharmakaya, the truth body, or the mind of a Buddha. And then transforming the bardo, is it okay if I just use that word? Bardo means the in-between. Right? So it's the between birth, between death and rebirth. There's a state that beings go through in between when they die and when they take their next rebirth. That's the bardo. So transforming the bardo, ordinary bardo, into the Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body of the Buddha, and then transforming ordinary birth, right, or rebirth, into the emanation body of the Buddha. And so, what's important there, I want to point something out, is that you're not, what it's getting at, in a way, to put it simply for now, we can get more complicated as we go along, but is that each of those enlightened states, highest yoga tantra is saying, our ordinary existence, now as human beings, particularly as humans, has has a basis that can be transformed into those enlightened qualities. And I'm going to give an example of what that means, okay? Because I want you to understand what it's getting at. So I'm going to use the example of transforming death into the Dharmakaya, okay? And so think of Dharmakaya as the mind of a Buddha. Let's just put it simply. Right? There's actually different ways to describe the Dharmakaya, but let's just leave it at that for now, right? So what does it mean, transforming death into the Dharmakaya? So what that means is this, and this is what's really unique about highest yoga tantra, is it describes in great detail, Actually, okay, I'll say another thing before I explain that in detail, because it'll help you understand that. Is on the completion stage, what's unique in highest yoga tantra is using the subtle body in the path. So and the subtle body, what that really means is they say in highest yoga tantra there are three important, for practice, there are three important things. One is the channels, right? So subtle channels in the body that are similar to what acupuncturists, for example, work with. But in highest yoga tantra, those acupuncturists are usually working with ones that go out to our, like to the skin, right, to our extremities. In highest yoga tantra, you're using your mind to what they call to gather certain things I'm about to talk about in deeper ones, the sort of core ones inside the body. The central channel that's right in the middle, the right channel, the left channel. There are these very subtle channels that are like the root. Those are like the root ones that then come out and branch out. Where if let's say you have elbow pain and an acupuncturist putting things here, right? Those are like branch channels that have gone far out. In highest yoga tantra, you're mostly working with very subtle channels in the center of the body. So there are channels, then there are drops. They call them tigling. One term is translated drop, which are like the subtle drops that, like, they're said to be from the mother and father, right, that sort of formed our body and that are still there. These subtle energies, you could call them, like, that go through those channels. And there's another thing that goes through those channels. So it's the third. So there's the channels, the drops, and then the third thing, there's a Sanskrit word pranas, which sometimes is translated winds, but it's not wind in the sense of like in this case. It's these subtle energies that run through your inner subtle body. And they have, I'm not going to get into detail, because there's introduction to Tantra, but it's not the details, but in general, they're like, they actually can, so for Tantric practitioners, right, like for completion stage practitioners, they can actually identify 10 different winds, 10 different subtle energies that flow through the body. And I want to share something that His Holiness Dalai Lama talks about. He says that, it's quite interesting, he was saying that there are different Tantric texts that describe the way the winds flow and the way the drops move differently. And at the Kala Chakra he mentioned this, actually, for anyone who was there, but now maybe we'll understand it better. He said, he pointed out that, like, the Kala Chakra system of describing how the winds move is slightly different than some other Tantric systems, how the winds move. And he was saying that there was one Tibetan yogi, right, who went in retreat and was doing, I think, Guya Samadja practice and Kala Chakra practice, and then he wrote. He said, well, I read how the Guya Samadja describes the winds move, and I just read about how the Kala Chakra. He said, then when I was able to see my own winds and how they move, mine moved like the Kala Chakra, and then so His Holiness said, that's why there are different Tantric systems, in part, is that different, the Buddha knew, right, or these great yogis knew that different people's subtle bodies work differently, and so they wrote texts for when you get to that level, you'll be able to then use those and say, oh, that's how my body, that's how my subtle energies work. And then they teach you how to transform those and use those in the path. Does that make sense? And the point is not just, at that point, the point is obviously not just to be healthy. Right? That's a side effect, great, but the point of this is to get enlightened quickly. Does that make sense? It's for practice. It's for your practice of bodhicitta, so you can achieve enlightenment quickly. Okay, so does that make sense? So on the completion stage, what you're doing actually is you're using, through the power of your mind, you're manipulating in a way, your own winds, or pranas, and drops, in order to bring certain things about. Okay, now I can go back and explain how the death, transforming death into the path, okay, of the Dharmakaya, transforming death into Dharmakaya. Yeah.
I just have a really quick question. So what's the method for gaining, like for a yogi to gain access to those kind of energies? Is it reaching shamatha? So what gives them, like, the ability to, like, manipulate those energies? Is it like a concentration type thing?
You don't have to achieve shamatha to begin manipulating those. I mean, actually, so no. I mean, having shamatha would help, of course. Then you'll be much more powerful. But actually, according to according to, like, the understandings in highest yoga tantra, all of our both positive and negative emotional states are influenced. Like, in other words, those winds are always active. in ordinary life, affecting so our emotions affect the way the winds flow, and then those winds flowing affects our emotions because they're interdependent. And so, so even a beginner, for example, if you do certain breathing exercises or you concentrate in a certain way, you have some impact on those. But the deeper your concentration gets, of course, the more impact you have. But yeah, so you use your mind to concentrate on certain points in the subtle body, and that more powerfully, and the more powerful your concentration, the more you influence them. Okay, so now I want to describe a little bit about transforming death into Dharmakaya. So what is said is that ordinarily in life, right, the winds and mostly the winds, but also the drops are all flowing throughout our system, right? But for everybody, actually, for all people, when you come to, like, at the center of your heart chakra, right, because chakra, that word, it means, chakra technically means wheel, right, but like it's like what's it called? Within the subtle body, there are like chakras, like there are points, like the point in the middle of the heart, from which channels branch out. Let's put it that way, right? So the idea would be at the time of death, according to the explanations of Hatha Yoga Tantra, what happens is that uniquely at that time, all of your winds and all of your energies absorb inward into that most subtle, into that chakra, right? And that's why, that's why you can eventually, you stop being able to move, you stop being able to see, hear, taste, all that, right? Because everything's being drawn within. And in the center of the heart chakra is what they call it the indestructible drop, actually, in those terminology. But what happens is that at the time of death, all your energies, all your winds absorbed there, and then your most subtle consciousness, called usually they call it the clear light consciousness, that it sort of abides there. And at the time of death, when all your other energies have absorbed and are no longer functioning, your most subtle mind of innate clear light, the clear light consciousness, is experienced. And that happens for everybody. And that's death, actually. According to Buddhism, death isn't when you stop breathing. Death is when the most subtle clear light consciousness manifests. That's the end of that lifetime, right? Because until that point, your consciousness has still been associated with this, the current life's body. Right? At that point, the mind of clear light manifests, and you're no longer going to use any of those you're not going to use your eyes, your ears, all that's over. Right? And the most subtle mind of innate clear light has manifested. For ordinary people, that's like, what's what we say? They're completely unconscious. They're sort of out of control at that point. Right? And then what happens for ordinary people is they sort of remain for however long in that state of clear light, and then their karmic tendencies, their karmic wind, you could say, kind of shifts a little bit, and they arise in the form of a bardo being. So you arise in some kind of sort of body that's not visible to ordinary people. Right? That sort of just and actually it's said to be for ordinary people very terrifying. You sort of like, actually, you can see that would be terrifying. It's like, for ordinary people, just like for us, right? If suddenly, you see like in a natural disaster, right? If suddenly you can't speak to anybody. Right? If suddenly like you lost all your stuff and you couldn't call anybody, you'd completely freak out, right? Well, in this case, that's happened, right? You can't talk to anybody you used to know. You've lost all your stuff, and you've lost your body at the same time. So ordinary people kind of freak out usually at that point. If you haven't, especially if you don't, especially if you haven't trained, right? It's normal that you would freak out. And then what they say is that then it's sort of like a weird dream or something that you can't wake up from, and your karmic winds kind of blow you here and there, and you see certain things, and you can see external things, you can also see like visions happen, like dreamlike visions in the bardo, right? So I'm just describing, and then you kind of you have this body that can move as fast as thought, right? Because it's not a gross body anymore. And they say that the bardo can last for up to 49 days. It could last shorter, or it could last for up to 49 days. That's why Tibetans, when somebody dies, they usually do a lot of practice for their loved ones for 49 days because they don't know if they've taken rebirth yet. And after 49 days, then they assume they've taken rebirth somewhere, or they have taken rebirth somewhere, so they kind of stop doing those rituals because the person's now somewhere else. And then you take rebirth, right? So that's the ordinary process of death, bardo, and rebirth. Right? But so that I want to talk just for a moment about that what's it called? The mind of clear light, or the clear light mind, or the most subtle mind, or innate clear light, whatever you want to call it. Because according to Tantra, right, that is the most subtle state of consciousness possible. It's the most subtle state of consciousness that exists. And everybody has that. So according to Highest Yoga Tantra, which is unique to Highest Yoga Tantra, there's no other teaching in Buddhism that talks about using that in the path to enlightenment. Because it's so subtle. Does that make sense? It's so subtle that it's very difficult to use. But Highest Yoga Tantra says that a person can learn, actually, can train their mind while they're alive to use that most subtle consciousness to meditate on emptiness. And that, you had asked about calm abiding. Right? Like it said that if somebody can meditate on emptiness with calm abiding, it's very powerful, right? Because calm abiding is very focused. This mind is unimaginably more concentrated and more subtle and more powerful even than the mind of calm abiding. And so what His Holiness Dalai Lama often points out, and the Tantric teachings point out, is if you can use that mind to meditate on emptiness, the transformative power of that will be humongously more than using any grosser level of mind to meditate on emptiness. In other words, because that's the subtlest level of your consciousness, if you can meditate on emptiness with that, your progress to enlightenment will be humongously faster. Because it's subtler and more powerful. Does that make sense, kind of? Also, if you can learn to use that mind to meditate on emptiness, right, then death is no longer a problem. Right? Like in other words, then you can control your own. You know what? Like when they say tokus, right? You say, oh, a Rinpoche or Toku, a reincarnated Lama. Right? Well, somebody who can use that mind to meditate on emptiness, right? You can imagine now, right? Like so, an ordinary person. Whatever, like, we're laying there in bed, and like we're scared and we can't, and like freaking out, and, mostly, it's disturbing to die, right? And then, so, an ordinary person, you die with some sense of maybe fear, right? And then, like we were describing, right, you just fly, your karmic winds throw you here and there, and eventually you take rebirth somewhere, right? But like, now I want to describe, so this transforming death into the Dharmakaya, right? There are different levels of this practice, right? So there are some beings who actually become a Buddha at the time of death. There are others who are just advanced practitioners who can use it.
So if you let's say you realize emptiness, but not using Tantra, you still can't control your rebirth?
Not totally.
So even if it's direct realization of emptiness, you still can't.
They're like bodhisattvas like that, they can influence their rebirth through prayer, through the power of prayer. Like they have so much merit. Actually, it's different. It's not the same as this. They have so much good karma, and they've purified so much that they can pray, may I be reborn as, they can like create a lot of merit, and then they can pray, right? Now, through compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And then they die with compassion,
yeah.
right? And if you die with compassion, that influences your next rebirth, but they can't actually control the whole process.
Even Arhat can do that.
Like for example, an Arya bodhisattva,
Yeah.
right? A bodhisattva who's seen emptiness directly. As they're dying, they can pray with compassion, right? May I be a benefit to others. May I continue my Dharma study. May I be a good student again and be able to practice. And if they die with a sense of love and compassion for others, wanting that, they influence their next rebirth for sure, right? But let me explain the difference though, right? So like a regular bodhisattva, right, who doesn't practice Tantra, let's say as they're dying, right? Now they've realized bodhicitta, right? So as they're dying, they're thinking, may I be of benefit to all beings, may the sufferings of others ripen upon me, may my happiness ripen for others, right? And they die with this feeling of, may I be of benefit to others, and may I guide others and teach others, right? And so if they die with that feeling, right, then if that's your last thought, then when they go into the bardo, That's the impetus. That's the energy they enter the bardo with, right? So in that, instead of having some kind of weird karmic wind pushing them, what they have is a karma of compassion that's guiding them, right? So their bardo is towards, where, like, so they arise as some bardo being looking, where can I help others? Where's the best place to help? So I mean, that's their impulse, right? So they have that kind of feeling. So that does influence their next rebirth, for sure, right? And for sure, definitely they'll have a good rebirth. If you die with that thought, right? May I be of benefit to others, then of course you're going to have a good next life where you're helping other beings. But now I want to describe the difference, though. For a tantric yogi, though, it's different, actually. For like let's say somebody who's advanced tantric practitioner, right? Really good practitioner of highest yoga tantra. As they're dying, actually, and this is like, actually you hear stories of this that, still it happens. Not just stories, it actually happens, right? Like where, again, they would generate bodhicitta, right? So they generate the bodhicitta. But actually, like, there's stories like this, like the Dalai Lama's senior tutor, Ling Rinpoche, was one. But there are many lamas who've done this. Where actually they sit up in meditation, right? They sit up like in their meditation, and they start meditating on those subtle energies. Right? And so they can actually tell, okay, this energy is absorbing into the heart. This energy is absorbing into the heart. They're coming, and so they're meditating the whole time, watching the process, and they're thinking, now is my time to meditate on emptiness, right? And they're aware. You see, it's a different. So they've generated bodhicitta, but now they're actually aware as their mind is getting subtler and subtler, right? They can no longer see, they can no longer hear, but they're still aware and watching their inner experience of subtler and subtler states of consciousness, and then they're unifying those with an understanding of emptiness. Now that's amazing, right? Like to be able to die that way. And then, for somebody who's a very good tantric practitioner, the way it's explained is that person, even down to the most subtle, final stages before death, they're still aware and meditating. And then when the clear light mind, the most subtle mind of innate clear light, arises, right, because all the other consciousness is absorbed, that person, it's called, actually there's a term for this it's called they call it the mother clear light and the son clear light meet. What that means is that they say the sun clear light is a metaphor. It's that the person the sun is their practice, right, of meditation on emptiness. And the mother is the actual clear light of death. What they say is that their practice, right, the sun, meets its mother, right, the source of everything, which was the actual clear light nature of mind that arises at death. And those meet at the time of death. And the person then has a very profound realization of emptiness. As they die, they are actually having the most profound kind of experience of emptiness. Right? And so, and actually, externally, because this happens in India, actually the Dalai Lama has encouraged people to study, like actually to show up and do like studies of these people, like those kind of tantric yogis. And what happens actually is that, and actually I've been there with one Lama who did this actually, where after he died, I was there, and you can see they're still in meditation actually, even though they're dead. Like from a Western point of view, they're not breathing, so they're dead. But actually, their body doesn't, even if it's hot, their body doesn't start to decay, it doesn't start to smell or decay. It doesn't start to change, like ordinary people's, in other words, whenever somebody dies, your body starts to decay. But these people who do that, actually, if you're there with them, you can sense something's unusual. But also, their body won't decay at all, as long as they're in that state. And actually, they're meditating on emptiness, which is amazing, right? And sometimes it's been for some lamas will do that just for 3 days, but some lamas will do that for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Where they'll remain in this state, and they've done it, that's why Dalai Lama said, come in India and see it because it's hot. Like he was saying, check, in humid, hot weather, this person's body's just sitting there like that in meditation. They're not breathing, right, but they're not decaying either, because their mind is still their subtle innate mind of clear light hasn't yet moved on, because it's meditating on emptiness still, and so. They call that tukdam. It's the Tibetan term for it. Because it's very commonly, among high lamas, it's a commonly... And I remember when I was there with one lama, when he did that, I got there, he had died the night... Actually, twice of it, but once I was close to where I spent more time. He had died the night before, and I came there, and actually, if you went in the room and meditated, you could feel, wow, he's meditating. And it was and actually, it smelled like flowers in the room. although there were no flowers there, it didn't smell like, I expected like death, and it was like 3 days later, it still smelled like flowers in the room. And then his teacher was there, and his teacher said, oh, now, he said, on the third day, his teacher said, he's getting ready to finish his meditation. And he said, within a couple hours, he'll finish. And then you could see, like, all of a sudden, like, he had been dead for 3 days, but all of a sudden you could see his, like, he wasn't breathing for 3 days, but suddenly, the teacher said, now he did, and you could actually look and see, he looked different, like, it was like something happened where suddenly he looked more dead. I don't know how to describe it right, but you could actually see that. I was like, wow, he knew he was going to leave, and then he left, and then he was like, now the body doesn't matter. Like, up until that point, you were just like, you have to be really careful not to disturb his meditation, and then it was like, now he's gone, we can have the coroner come, no problem, it doesn't matter anymore. But, because he was doing this Tukdam practice for 2 days, this Lama, where he was in meditation, essentially, right, for 3 days, and without any movement of his mind, right? His mind was completely absorbed in emptiness for 3 days. And the Dalai Lama's tutor, I think, did that in India for like 2 weeks or more. I can't remember the length of time now. But and there were people coming and going. I mean, everybody was like, many people came and saw this. Like, and so the Dalai Lama wanted scientists to study that, actually, to see like how the body, sort of say it, like how the body doesn't decay and how it's and what's happening, because ordinarily if you're there you sense what the difference is, but he wanted scientists to actually study the difference, see if they could measure these things, because it was so unusual. It's an unusual phenomenon anywhere outside of Tibet, outside of highest yoga tantra, actually. But okay, so from the inner point of view, right, what happens then? So I just want to describe that, right? So the person who's practiced deity yoga and practiced and worked with their subtle energies and know how to do that, right? So let's say they meditate for 3 days or 2 weeks or whatever in this absorption on emptiness, right? So then, like, these reincarnate lamas, what happens next? So first of all, some become a Buddha at that point. But I'm not going to, let's step back, let's pretend it's not that, so that's the most advanced person. But even somebody who's just a good tantric yogi, but is not yet becoming a Buddha. So what happens then, right, is for that person, when their meditation on the clear light ends, instead of having an ordinary, remember I said transforming so they've meditated on emptiness, right, which is transforming death into the Dharma, into the mind of a Buddha, right? Then, how do you transform the bardo into the Sambodhikaya? For them, right, rather than arising as some kind of, like, whatever your next rebirth is going to be, because of their mental training, they arise in the form of deity. Right? So now, instead of having an ordinary bardo body as, like, wherever you're going to be next, is usually what your bardo body looks like. Their bardo body would have, maybe like we just did, 4 arms, right, like radiating light rays made of light.
Could the bardo body, depending on which tantra you're talking about, could it be a syllable?
At this point, no. What happens, like in the visualizations, it's a syllable, right? When you're doing the generation stage, it's like Kri, for example, or you just did, or Bam, or Hum, or whatever. But when somebody, the real person, actually died, like if it's our highest yoga tantra practice, it would be forearms, but let's say they might arise, like at the first movement of their mind, if they're like a great yogi like that, what would automatically, immediately, they would appear, let's say, as Yamantaka or Vajrayogini, with all the, everything of that deity would appear, and that's how they would appear to themselves at that point. So at that point, it would be the actual body that looked like a deity or something like that. And then because they've been aware that whole time, right, they think, well, now then they can more specifically choose. Actually, that's what it says. So they can actually say, okay, I want to take rebirth. Like I see a person who's good, would be a good parent for somebody who wants to practice the path, and good 2 parents, and they can actually say, I'm going to take rebirth there, and actually control the whole process. Does that make sense? So it's not just by the power, for them it's not just by the power of prayer. Like they can actually look and see, like, okay, who lives close to who lives close to the Dalai Lama, I want to study with him, or who lives close to the monastery, oh, they're nearby, let me go check it out. And they can actually watch those people, make sure that they're like, whatever, would be good parents, and they can actually choose, okay, now they're going to have sex, I'm going to go ahead and zip in there while I have a chance. And they go ahead and take rebirth. So that's the process for a tulku. Yeah, and also actually I'll share this one. Like I remember Rinpa Rinpoche before he died, he told what was it? He was getting ready to die, and he said to me, like he was that kind of, he's this what, sixth or seventh, so he's been doing that over. I mean, he's a tantric yogi like that. He's been doing that over and over. I remember him saying to me, he said, "This body," he went like this. Look, this. He was like 80 something, and he had cancer and other diabetes, and he kind of said, you know, the purpose is to be a benefit to others. Look at this old body now. I can't do hardly anything. And he said, I've got to go get a new one. I'll see you next time. I'll see you soon. Really, he was like that. But then he said to, this is his level of control actually. I mean, he said, first of all, he said, he went to Kensho Rinpoche, said, will you be my teacher? When I come back, I need to study. And Kensho Rinpoche said, yes, of course. Right? And then he went to Gelek Rinpoche, and he said, I'm going to be easy to find. He said, go to the Sarah Monastery and blow a really loud conch shell, and I'll be close enough I would just be able to hear it. And he said, that's where I'll be. It won't be difficult. You know, and then he took rebirth right there. Like, you know, he did exactly that, right? And then, and Kensho Rinpoche found him. You know, I mean, Kensho Rinpoche found the name. They gave it to the Dalai Lama. With Lama Zopa Rinpoche was involved. Kensho Rinpoche got the names. Lama Zopa gave him to the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama said, this is him. And then, you know, and now he studies with Kensho Rinpoche. My point is that's like a different level of control over your rebirth, right? Like where he literally could say, this is where I'll be. You know, like a Karmapa sometimes would say, this is my name. This will be my name even. You know, my name will be so-and-so. My parents will be that. Rinpoche didn't say his name, but he said, I'll be in this town. He said, essentially, I'll be in this town. You know, and I'll be reborn in this time, you know, this long after I'm dead. And you come there and look. And this will be, and he said, he actually chose, he said, I want this person. He said, Kensho Rinpoche would be my teacher. And then he chose a monk and he said, will you be my, he said, I want you to be my, like the person who, you know, like there's a monk who like take care of you, feed you, you know, at the monastery when you're old enough, they're the one who feeds you and make sure you get to class. Not your teacher, but like, you know, like when you're a kid still, you need a monk who's kind of like gonna take care of the food and if you need a doctor, they'll take you to the doctor and make sure you get to class on time and get you new robes. And he chose the person who would be that. You know, I mean, so that's a different level of control over an ordinary, that ordinary bodhisattva could do through the power of prayer, but the tantric yogi can actually say, you know, it'll be in this town, you know, and so on. I'll be at this time, I'll be there, you know, and I'll pick up my practices exactly where I left off, kind of thing. Or, you know, like, and even projects, right? Like, I'll start this project because I'll come back and finish it next time. But it's a different level of control that person has. But then also, right, like, the other unique, and then also, like, because they can use that innate mind of clear light to meditate on emptiness, they can progress to enlightenment so much faster. That's part of the point. And that they can, you know, by using the subtle body in the practice, and then also they can, those kind of practitioners, also like, because they become, what's I going to say this? Their ability to use subtle states of consciousness becomes better and better, right? So there's another quality with those kind of practitioners, which is that, like they can also, like, so they can use the bardo, right, as part of their practice. Instead of an ordinary bardo, when they're in between, they're saying, right, they're radiating light rays and meditating on, you know, and then also in their dreams, right? Like ordinary people, like ordinary practitioners, right? When we're awake, we use a small percentage of our waking hours, hopefully, to practice, and then when we're asleep, it's very difficult to use them. But as I'd written to you about this one time, like these kind of practitioners can, they also intentionally practice being aware in their dreams. They actually practice where as they're falling asleep, they actually watch their consciousness, right, and they see the process of falling asleep. Then they see the dream arising, right, and then they can intentionally use the dream. So, like in a dream, for example, you know, like they actually practice transforming the dream. Right? So a yogi like this, right, who's practicing Tantra, right, which is divine appearances, right. So like, even if a dream starts off with an ordinary appearance, they can transform, right? So they'll meditate on emptiness, dissolve their dream body, arise in the dream in the form of a deity, for example, and then radiate light rays and go study Dharma in their dreams or something, or go meditate on compassion in their dreams, or meditate on whatever, you know. So they'll continue their practices even while they're dreaming. So it's a much more efficient use of your life if you can do that.
What do you mean go study Dharma when you're in your dream?
They say actually yogis like that they'll actually think, okay, I want to go find my guru in their dream even, you know, and they'll go like and they'll go and study like with their guru in their dream. I'll tell a funny story. One time I was working on a project with Lama Zopa, and we were talking about the project, and then I was outside and it was like raining, And Rinpoche says to me, taking him to his car, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche says to me, "Oh, I have a new idea for the project." It was like a writing project. I was like, "Oh, cool." And so I'm standing there, it's like raining, and Rinpoche got in the car, and it's raining. And I say, "What's the idea, Rinpoche?" And Rinpoche said, "I'll come and tell you in your dreams." And I said, I thought for like a moment, I said, "Well, Rinpoche, I'm sure you'll come, but I may not remember my dream. So what then?" And then Rinpoche said, "Then I'll tell you on the wind." And then I thought for a moment, I said, "Well, what if I don't hear it on the wind? How about email?" And then Rinpoche just cracked up. So we just laughed and laughed. He thought that was he did send me. But like, so what he was getting at, like Rinpoche, because Lama Zopa Rinpoche actually, many people have the experience of something like Lama Zopa Rinpoche or Dalai Lama, like they appear in people's dreams in an intentional way. So I think like somebody who's at this level can actually go meet their Lama's dream body and take teachings like that. But in my case, I can't even remember the dream if it comes to me. The tantric yogi can actually intentionally sort of create, say I'm going to go and find my guru. So it's a different thing. But yeah, there's a practice of like transforming the dream, like where you actually intentionally will use dreams. For example, even on a simple level, you can do that, right? Like practicing patience in the dream, learning to face fears in the dream. It's a safer place to do that. Right? So that's like they call it dream yoga. You intentionally practice becoming aware of the dream, and then you use the dream. It's not just to be aware; it's then to use the dream to practice positive things. So Highest Yoga Tantra has these unique aspects, then, right? Of like, and then ultimately, I won't get into detail about this, but ultimately, like if one wants to, like then, okay, one other thing I almost left this out. So one more thing about Highest Yoga Tantra that's unique, actually, is remember, so we've said that like, it's in the Easy Path, but that like, so the Shakyamuni Buddha took 3 countless great eons, right, to become a Buddha. Which is, and at one countless great eon, I forget what it was, like in years, it was something like 10 to the either 57th or 58th power, like that many zeros. That's one countless great eon, and it's like 3 of those or something. And then they say through the 3 lower classes of Tantra, you can achieve what are called siddhis, like mystical powers or something like that, where you can live longer. So like Nagarjuna, who we're going to study his text with, he's said to have achieved the siddhi of immortality. I always think, I thought this was hilarious. Oh, Jeff's not here. It was really funny. At one time at my house, when Kenshin Rinpoche was teaching, before we had the center, he said he was talking about death, impermanence and death, and he said, even if you achieve immortality, you're still going to die. So that was really funny. He said that immortality doesn't mean forever. That was really funny. Even if you achieve the siddhi of immortality, you're still going to die. They give you in the Nagarjuna, for example. Like he said to live for hundreds of years, but then he died also. So. Who wrote the text we're studying next week? So one is through lower tantras. It's said that you can achieve these like ability for immortality, for like long life, let's say, and then you have more time to practice. Right? You can practice. But Highest Yoga Tantra, they say there's a phrase they use that only through Highest Yoga Tantra can you do this. It's achieve enlightenment in one brief lifetime in this degenerate era. Right? So brief lifetime means like our lives, our normal lifespan. And they say through Highest Yoga Tantra you can achieve full enlightenment of Buddhahood. Actually not just like progress, but actually become a Buddha in this brief life. Right? Like so that means, and then sometimes they say some people in the past have done that even in like 12 years or 3 years, right? And they give the example of Milarepa, who they say was the first, some people say he was the first Tibetan who went from being, there were other Tibetans who had achieved enlightenment, but he was the first Tibetan who went from being an ordinary person all the way to enlightenment in one life. Like there were other Tibetans who were like, they were, like, had been doing what I was describing, taking rebirth over and over and progressing, and they were quite high along the path, and they were born as Tibetan, and they finished. But he was the first person of Tibetans, they say, who was like totally an ordinary person when he was born, and before he died, he was completely enlightened Buddha with all the qualities of Buddha. But it's after him, many other Tibetans did that. Many, through the practice of Highest Yoga Tantra. And so that's a completely unique quality of Highest Yoga Tantra. And that's the one where, remember I was saying, like, sometimes they say that, like, ordinary Buddhist practitioners, sometimes on this earth, are praying, may I be reborn in a Pure Land. And bodhisattvas and pure nuns are praying everywhere on the earth, because there's more suffering there, but also you have this kind of body that has, because these bodies, this is what's unique, is these bodies have those winds and drops and channels. Not all bodies have those, like not all, in other realms and in other pure lands, and they don't have the same kind of makeup as us. And you need this kind of makeup to practice highest yoga tantra that can achieve enlightenment in one lifetime. And so that's unique, and that comes in the completion stage, actually, right? So in order to do that, you have to have realized, though, first renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. You have to have practiced well the generation stage and had success in that practice. And then you have to practice the completion stage of using those subtle winds and energies and in the channels. And actually, what a practitioner, I want to share this too. I think it's okay to share. What a practitioner at that level can do is they can actually manifest the mind. A practitioner who's going to achieve enlightenment in this life, right? What they learn how to do is they don't have to wait till death. They learn to control those subtle energies so that you were so well, right, through their concentration, that they can manifest the mind of the most subtle mind of innate clear light, even while they're alive. Right? And they can do that over and over when they want to through the practice of their own meditation, and they can meditate on emptiness with that over and over in this life. So you see how that's a very unique. And then even also, because they know how to do that, then they can achieve what's called an illusory body, which is a unique thing to highest yoga tantra, where they can actually, even while they're alive, have this kind of very pure body that they can send out and practice with. So anyway, somebody like that can achieve enlightenment very, very fast through those kind of practices of the completion stage of highest yoga tantra. Right? But all of that, do you see it going back to the very first point of this whole tantric module? All of that is dependent on realizing renunciation, having bodhicitta, and realizing emptiness. Otherwise, it's just some kind of weird power trip, right? You just be like, oh wow, cool, I can do some kind of magic something. I don't know. Which actually has no meaning at all, right? If you don't have bodhicitta, if you're not motivated by the wish to achieve enlightenment for all beings, then this doesn't. Then all these other practices, right, like dream yoga or subtle body energy things, what's there to say? Then they don't become a cause of enlightenment at all. They don't even become a cause of good rebirth. Does that make sense? So you have to. They have to be motivated by compassion, otherwise they don't work in the right way. So the very fundamental thing, because these are all Mahayana practices, right? So I just want to come back to that, is that the core thing is you have to generate, renunciation, which really in this context means, right, you can't be doing this stuff if you're doing it out of I want to have some kind, like Tantra talks about using great bliss. Right? Well, if you think, I just want bliss for myself, then Tantra doesn't work at all, right? Or if you're thinking, I want to achieve some kind of subtle thing because it's seems really fun, that's fine, but that doesn't get you enlightened, because it doesn't work then. These practices have to be motivated by bodhicitta, actually, right? And then I'll say one other thing, when they talk about achieving enlightenment quickly, actually, because people make this mistake, actually. So I will share this, because sometimes people think oh, cool, especially I think this is true in all cultures, but I think Americans might be the worst. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that, because I don't know all cultures, but I think it's possible it could be particularly bad. It's some idea of highest yoga tantra, because that's the word highest. Oh, that's for me. And fast, and like that, high and fast. Oh, that's I don't know, some kind of arrogance, I think, and that's not helpful. And I'll say this. The reason I'm saying it is this: is sometimes people think that, and then try to practice highest yoga tantra, right? And even think, and then among highest yoga tantra, the completion stage sounds better than the generation, because then I'm highest and I'm at the completion. And then, of course, it doesn't work at all, right? Because, it's it would be the equivalent of saying, what's the word? I think that, what's the word? If somebody said, I think that rocket science, or let's say, actually I'll use the example of neurosurgery, right? I think neurosurgery is really cool. So if somebody's an 8-year-old and thought, I think neurosurgery is really cool, I'm skipping the rest of elementary school, junior high, high school, college, and medical school, and my residency. I'm going straight to neurosurgery. And they somehow, if their dad was a neurosurgeon, they took the equipment, what they would do is kill somebody, right? Or it wouldn't, they would just end up killing somebody, not helping, right? It's a bit like that. Neurosurgery is amazing, right? It's an amazing thing that it exists, but only for somebody who's, finished high school, gone to college, not just college, right, but then gone to gone to medical school and then done their residency and their, whatever we call it, like their internships and residencies and postdoc and their, whatever all those other things are, right? And then it's great that they should do neurosurgery. But it's a bit like that. Does that make sense? Like if we immediately say, I'm going to do the completion stage of ISU, it's like because it's really like an inner technology. These are inner technologies, right? But it'd be like the wrong person having that technology, and then all they do is hurt themselves and others. So these practices are really awesome, actually. They're amazing, wonderful practices that can bring about enlightenment and great benefit to others, but they have to come in the right order. Does that make sense? And so, like what Lama Tsongkhapa and the teachers of the tradition say is that what's helpful is to understand a little bit about these things. That's why we have this introduction to Tantra class, right? To generate a sense of enthusiasm, right? And a sense of like, wow, that exists. And wow, like maybe I could even study it a little bit and have some inspiration to go back to the bodhicitta practice, right? For example, and say, wow, I really want to write. Because one thing that a number of lamas have said, that I've heard personally, that I thought was a very good point, was they said, if you haven't realized bodhicitta and you go into a tantric retreat, you can do like a 12-year tantric retreat, and you come out and you can't really tell if the person benefited much at all. And say if somebody's realized bodhicitta first, they've actually realized bodhicitta, and then they go into tantric retreat, then they come out of Buddha very fast. Like, so that's the difference. Otherwise, because you meet people like that where they like are very enthusiastic. I met some young people like that who were like, nice people. Like, I think I could have done that if I didn't have good teachers to advise me. Like, but where you could be like, oh, that's so cool, and they go off on a retreat, and then what happens is this. Actually, really, what happens is this: it's like having if you have all that neurosurgery technique and you go off somewhere, but you don't have you don't have a professor or somebody you're doing it in, but you would just like play around with the equipment. Eventually, you'd give up because you don't know how to. It's like that in a way. That if you go off and try to use those techniques without proper teachings from your guru and then without proper preliminaries, usually what happens is that you try them out for a little while and you go, that didn't work, and you give up, right? But if you realize the other practices first, right? Then first of all, there's two benefits I want to mention. One is if you understand more about these tantric teachings, then you say, wow, if I could just finish the bodhicitta and really not finish the preliminaries of realizing bodhicitta, right? Then I can fulfill the aspiration of bodhicitta. Not that you finish bodhicitta, but you can finish that then you can fulfill the aspiration. Does that make sense? Like I can realize bodhicitta, and then that exists, and I can quickly benefit others. So I mean, it's like the inspiration of somebody actually, I'll give a metaphor for a moment. Like I was using the neurosurgery thing, right? Let's say a neurosurgeon wants to do neurosurgery, right? And they're not that interested in statistics, but they have to take statistics classes, right? Well, if they understand, wow, I'm so inspired by how neurosurgery works, and I have to read the medical journal, so fine, I'll take the statistics class, and when they're taking the class, they may find it difficult, but they say, that's what I want to do, fine, I'm going to work really hard at statistics, for example. Maybe they don't like statistics, right? So they would study hard in statistics because they're trying to get to another goal. Does that make sense? And my point is that sometimes understanding these highest yoga tantra teachings, even if we're not ready to practice them, can be inspiration like that. Wow, I can achieve these amazing benefits to others. You see what I mean? Like I can achieve so much progress to help other people, other beings, and that should energize our earlier practice, right? So then you go back to like the very first about impermanence and death and precious human rebirth, but you have more energy then to practice those early trainings so that you can progress up through the actual realizations, right? And then very fast you can become, enlightened if you do it in the right order.
So should tantric practice shouldn't really have a place for someone who hasn't realized bodhicitta?
No, I wouldn't say that. Like I think it's this. It's what the teachers say is this: is that it's actually so I mean, first of all, under the guidance. I mean, first of all, that you can't. I said this in the previous class is that first of all, you can't practice tantra without a teacher, right? Because it requires an initiation to start, right? So you have to take the initiation from a qualified lama, a teacher, whatever, guru, and then and then under the guidance of a teacher, it's fine to practice some tantra at any phase. But what all the lamas say is this: is that until you're ready, that the tantric practice would be like you're creating good karmic imprints, you're familiarizing yourself with something, you're gaining some benefit from it, but your main practice still would be like in the Glugpa we call it the Lamrim. Right? It's the same in all the Tibetan traditions. Another teacher might call it the four thoughts that turn the mind, for example, or again, Hopa's jewel arm of liberation, if you were Kagyu, or the, what's it called, the three perceptions, if you're, I think it's called the three, something like that in the Sakya tradition, you know, or the what's it called, also the Sachin Kangalupa's before, what's that teaching before, anyway, they're like, it's the same thing, it's the same as Lam Rim, it's like Lojong. The first half of the Lamdre is like that. So the point is that that should be our main practice. That's my main point. So like, in other words, if you were going to practice Tantra, like let's say if you received like from the Dalai Lama an Avalokiteshvara initiation, well then, like, and really the way practitioner, like if you're practicing, right? Well, that's excellent, right? In other words, to do like, then we would do Om Mani Padme Hung, you would do the Tantric, you know, you would do some practice of Avalokiteshvara, you know, but it would be a supplement to your practice of, let's say, meditating on bodhicitta, right? And because you're, you know, because that's connected to compassion, it might help your practice of bodhicitta. But your main practice would be, you know, like practicing the low scope, middle scope, great scope of Lam Rim, and gaining those realizations. But again, you would do some of this, like, and then as you, what's the word to say it? And actually, the Lam Rim doesn't stop. It's just a matter of how much, like, you know, like at the beginning, you might be spending the vast majority of your time doing the Lam Rim practice, right? And then a little bit of time doing a little bit of tantric meditation if you had that initiation. But then slowly, like if you, so we say this, like you might, you know, like do, but even like, I'll share too, the one thing that like Lama Zopa Rinpoche really emphasizes very wonderfully, I think, is even when one does, like, let's say a tantric retreat, then, you know, if somebody, it's different. Like in other words, if somebody's already realized all the Lam Rim points, well, then they would still review those, but they don't have to spend long on it. It's not that it's not actually that you stop doing Lam Rim practice. It's that if you realize that, then just the word, you just think the word bodhicitta, and wow, well, it's like some powerful experience. Well, then you don't have to spend an hour doing that, right? But the point is that for ordinary people, we emphasize Lam Rim, and then even if we do some tantric retreat, that you would integrate the Lam Rim into that. You know, so you do extensive Lam Rim meditations, you know, and then do some maybe mantra recitation or visualization of the deity or something like that. But you would do long periods of meditating on Lam Rim as well. So you integrate them, but you emphasize the Lam Rim part. Does that make sense? And you don't, I guess I want to say that too, it's not that you ever stop, it's not that you reach a point where you say, oh, now I don't have to emphasize Lam Rim anymore. The point is like, if somebody's, like, let's say, deeply realized renunciation, well, then they've deeply realized it, so it's like, it's already part of their ordinary experience, in other words, and they don't have to spend very long on it to generate that very powerful, visceral experience of that. So they don't stop doing that practice, it's just, they don't have to sit, they don't have to spend hours on it, like at the beginning we have to. But once you become very, what's the word? Once you've realized that and it's infused your being, well then, you know, they still think that when they wake up, but that's very natural for them. So then they move on, their main focus becomes bodhicitta, for example, right? And they do a little bit of tantra. But then once the person's realized bodhicitta, right, then that's really the turning point where you can really focus on tantra, because then it's easy to generate bodhicitta for that person, right? It's like there is their ordinary, when they wake up in the morning, that's part of their experience. They just think about it a little bit, it becomes like an overwhelming sense of compassion and love for others. So for that person, again, then they don't have to spend hours they don't have to spend hours and hours like reviewing the 7-point cause and effect method, or the to generate bodhicitta, or the equalizing and exchanging self for others method for generating bodhicitta. They can just think of that very quickly, and they generate an overwhelming sense of bodhicitta. You can see how for that person then, they would feel, wow, now I really want to practice, because my aspiration is to become enlightened for all beings, right? And that's totally infusing them. And then they naturally want to do all these other tantric practices, because they're like, that's how they're going to fulfill the bodhicitta. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So then these tantric practices just become like like a natural expression of their bodhicitta motivation. Because it's like, you know, now these are the things that will actually let me fulfill my bodhicitta wish to benefit others extensively. So you see how it becomes like a very natural progression. So it's not that you ever stop doing the Lam Rim, it's that the Lam Rim sort of becomes so integrated into your being that then the tantric practice becomes an expression of that.
I know what Nundro is, but what in relationship to this, I mean, I know that's like a very preliminary, but is that like a preparation or like the very basic level?
Yeah, so the Nundro, right, or like sometimes called the preliminary practices,
Yeah.
right? That's how they translate that a lot of times. Like first of all, there are different sets of Nundros, you know, and sometimes, like sometimes there are 4. Some people do 9 Nundros. Some lamas, also like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, oftentimes will give people unique Nundros for them So it's up to you, if you want to do Nundros, how to do that. But I want to say a couple things about Nundro. So so Nundro can include like doing like 100,000 Vajrasattva recitations while doing the 4 powers of purification. Right? It's not just reciting the mantra; you have to do the actual practice, right, of purifying karma, or 100,000 prostrations, or 100,000 Guru Yoga practices, Guru Yoga practices. So I want to say a few things about it. One is, it's not, I don't, like, it doesn't really, I don't think those are really preliminary in a sense. I mean, those are very profound practices. And actually, like, if you look at, like, very, great yogis and great lamas, they do those practices still. So it's not like somebody, again, like Lam Rim again, the Nindro practice is really, I sometimes view that this way, first of all, that doing 100,000 is just learning how to do it well. Like, that you do 100,000 so that you really get the hang of it, so that then you can do it in your daily life. I think sometimes people have had the idea, like, do 100,000, phew, I finished that. And that's, I don't think that's right. I think it's like, what's I say this? Like, when you're learning anything well, you do it over and over and over, and then like you get good at it, so then you can use it in your daily life. I really view it that way, that the Nindra, like you do 100,000, like why do 100,000 Vajrasattva practices, or 100,000 prostration, or 100,000 Guru Yoga? It's emphasizing the importance of it, and you're purifying, creating a lot of good karma. I think it's also that you're really learning the practice well. That's one thing. So I don't think they're really preliminary, because if you look in, for example, any Highest Yoga, let's say Highest Yoga Tantra practice, right? I think this is true, every sadhana, every like complete sadhana of Highest Yoga Tantra includes Vajrasattva in it. So it doesn't mean like, oh, I finished my 100,000 Vajrasattvas, now I'm done. It's like I learned how to do that, so now when I'm doing my Highest Yoga Tantra practice, I really know how to do that part well. That's one thing. But then there is some instruction like this in a lot of texts that will say, if you're going to do like a particular like tantric retreat, let's say, like a retreat of some Highest Yoga Tantra deity like Yamataka or Vajrayogini or Guhya Samaja, sometimes in the text it'll say, before doing this retreat, if you can, it's good to do some of those nundros. And the idea there, I think, is this, is that the nundro practices are to purify your negative karma and to accumulate positive karma. And so there's some idea, one is I still think it's what I said earlier, that you're familiarizing yourself with really important practices. But the other, I think, is if you're getting ready to do some kind of like a particular tantric retreat, that sometimes doing those is like removing obstacles and creating the causes to have success in that retreat. So if you did like so sometimes people will do, like before they go do like a retreat of a particular Highest Yoga Tantra day, they'll do, let's say, the Vajrasattva because they want to purify obstacles and negative karmas that will get in the way of succeeding at their retreat. And they might do the Guru Yoga practice as a way of accumulating a lot of positive energy so that they'll be more likely to have success in the later retreat. But in my experience, like let's say the person did that, right? They did a nundro and they did a retreat. Many times they'll go back and then do those nundros again or something
I think
like that.
Pandra Rinpoche actually said that you can achieve enlightenment through, I believe she said that, just through Nundra.
Yeah, it's
You
very,
know,
very
like
profound.
the-
And the same thing, Guru Yoga is the essence of all the Highest Yoga Tantra practices too anyway. So it's not Guru Yoga, which is a nundro, but actually Guru Yoga is the most profound, in my opinion, Guru Yoga is the most profound practice, really. So I think sometimes it's like, well, because, they say the nundro, well, it's reciting 100,000 times a certain verse or something. But actually that's not, that's just the way, really those are just, I don't know what the word is, like a technique to really get an inner, the point is not to recite, you could put a tape recorder and the tape recorder could do it 100,000 times. That's not the point, really. The point is you recite it in order to infuse your mind with it and get really familiar with it and get good at it. But yeah, they're very profound practices. So they're not really preliminary in that sense.
But I was just thinking
But
in
it's
the
sort of-
context of this, but that's.
Yeah. But does that answer it too? Like that you might do those, I think they call it preliminary because sometimes it says do it before a retreat.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really why they call it preliminary. But, and if somebody's really interested in those, you can either do there's ordinary sets of them, like 100,000 of this, that, and the other, or you can ask your teacher, and they'll tell you, they might tell you, oh, for you, this would be better, or something. And it isn't always, sometimes if you have a teacher, sometimes they'll give you really helpful advice, where, what you might have thought to do might not be the best fit for you. So, they might be able to suggest, if you feel like doing something like intensive practice like that, a particular set that worked for you. So I suggest if you have the chance, it's good to ask somebody. Okay, well, let's dedicate merit. So again, we'll do that before through the supreme jewel bodhicitta, where it is not arisen, may it rise and grow, or has arisen, may it not diminish, but increase, more and more. And in the snowy mountain paradise, you the source of good and happiness, all-powerful Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara is end. Let's dedicate also to all of the teachers, may live long, all their wishes may be fulfilled. And may all of us quickly achieve enlightenment, or be of benefit to all sentient beings. May we progress to realizations of renunciation, bodhicitta, the perfect view of emptiness, the generation stage and the completion stage of highest yoga tantra, in order to achieve the resultant state of Buddha, Vajradhara, and the of ultimate benefit